I continue my series on the 36 decans of the zodiac today with Virgo I, the first 10 degrees of Virgo. And wow, what a difference in signs between Leo, which is ruled by the sun and is a fire sign. That's the last sign we covered. And Virgo, which is an earth sign, and it's ruled by Mercury. So we move from Leo to Virgo, and we're moving from sort of this centering inspirational force to a down to earth, pragmatic, analytical, organized, getting down to business kind of sign, and that's Virgo. But what differentiates the first decan of Virgo from the other two decans of Virgo are the planets that rule the decan. And here we have Mercury under the triplicity system and the sun under the Chaldean order. I'll unpack how that impacts this decan, as well as look at some ancient texts and the tarot and Kabbalah. And then we'll dive deep into the chart of Kurt Vonnegut, who had his ascendant degree in this part of Virgo, and he's a famous writer with an attention to detail and a commitment to his craft that is symbolic of this decan of Virgo. So there's a lot to unpack. I hope you enjoy it. If you do, like and subscribe. It will help people find my content. So first, let's talk about the planetary rulers of this decan. So the sign overall is ruled by Mercury, but so is the decan. So we have an added quality of Mercury to this decan. And in addition, we're going to talk about the sun also rules this decan, and we'll see what happens when you combine Mercury with the sun. But let's just talk first about who is Mercury? What is that planet all about? Well, Mercury was Hermes in the Greek pantheon, and he was the messenger to the gods. He brought messages from the underworld to the upper world. And he was a trickster figure as well. If you ever read the myths about Hermes when he was a young boy, he played a trick on his older brother Apollo where he stole his cows, and he did it in this really funny way where he kind of played a joke and used his capacity to switch mind or play mind games with somebody to accomplish this feat. You have to check out that myth. It's one of my favorites. Of course, I have Mercury in this decan, so I'm really familiar with the energy of being the trickster and playing with language and order. That's kind of what Mercury does. Mercury can be really good at business because of that analytic capacity. He's good at, the planet is good at communication when it's well placed, oftentimes playing with words or writing or finding ways to order and structure the world that are sometimes humorous. And we're going to see that with Kurt Vonnegut. That's all part of that Mercury playful quality. But then we add to Mercury the sun, right? The sun rules this decan as well. And as I've said many times, the sun is the body that all the other planets revolve around. It's this centering force. The sun has a quality of observing, right? It's the eyes, it's the light that shines our path during the day. It's what's visible, it's what's conscious. So something about observing capacity and consciousness is going to come into play in this decan as well. And then, of course, we also know the sun symbolically has this consistent quality. It rises in the east in the morning and sets in the west at night. It does that every day. So there's also something about a dedication, a stillness, a fixedness of the energy of this decan. So when we take Mercury and the sun and we put them in an earth sign, which is what Virgo is, you really get this quality of committing oneself, that consistent attention to detail that allows one to accomplish something in the material world. Material world is that earth quality, right? So then we really see this energy of the first decan, or what I just described as far as the planets that rule the decan, is reflected in the ancient texts that describe this face. And I'm going to pull up a whiteboard now that's going to sort of help out on this this little talk today. One thing you'll notice if you've been watching my videos is you can see that I am constantly sort of tweaking and improving my process in presentation. And so you'll see with the whiteboards today that I've gone into a little bit more detail and honed my craft, right? My Mercury is in this Decan, and really this Decan we're going to see with the tarot card that we look at is all about revising and honing one's craft and kind of perfecting things that you present into the world. So when we look at the three texts, we're going to see they all suggest this combination of Mercury's sort of the cleverness and attention to detail that's Mercury, along with the attention itself of the sun, combined with that Virgo humility. I didn't talk about Virgo being an earth sign, but it's also the sign of the maiden in the fall who spends the time separating the wheat from the chaff. There's something about Virgo that just has a humble nature. It can be about service as part of its energy. And so we really see this in the descriptions from the ancient texts. The Javanajataka describes this face as the first portion of Virgo is a black man who possesses a subtle knowledge of crafts and who knows the rules of calculating, cleverness, and storytelling. He is attached to beauty and skill and is determined in his purpose. And there we see the idea that this face of the Zodiac can be about people who are writers, who have a capacity for writing, who have a cleverness, who are good at calculations and storytelling. When we go on to the Picatrix, we really pick up the image of humility. We have a beautiful girl covered over with a woolen sheet and holding in her hand a pomegranate. And this is a face of sowing and plowing and of making trees to sprout, gathering bunches of grapes and of the good life. Picatrix also notes that this face is excellent for writers and businessmen. Now, when I talked about humility, you see the notion of humility from the fact that she's a beautiful girl, but she's covered with a simple woolen sheet, right? So there's this humble quality. And then, of course, we also see in this description of the face, the reality that people that have points or planets in this part of Virgo can be good at making things manifest in the world through their hard work, through their attention to detail. They have this capacity to grow things. We're going to see this reflected in the tarot cards, particularly in the tarot card from Thoth. And then the last description from Agrippa has a similar vibe. You have a good maid, that maiden quality of Virgo, and a man casting seeds, and it can have to do with plowing, sowing, and peopling. So again, there's something about Virgo that can be about bringing forth through your careful observation of the world, some new product that serves the world, right? This growth energy. So then let's move to the next slide, which is the tarot cards that are associated with this Decan. And here right away, we see the same energy of humility, commitment to work, creating something in the real world, that earth energy. In the tarot card, the Eight of Pentacles from the Rider-Waite deck, that's the card that you see on the left. We see an artisan. He's already constructed 6 pentacles, right? And so he's hard at work on the 7th pentacle, and the 8th is yet to come. This is kind of an interesting reference, perhaps, to the Kabbalah that we're going to talk about, the connection between, in Kabbalah, the Sephirah Netzach and the Sephirah Had. And you'll see that in a minute. Netzach relates to the number 7, which is the spiritual inspiration. And Had, which is the Netzach that's associated with the number 8, that's the Sephirot associated with the number 8, has to do with taking that divine inspiration and putting it in the real world, making it into something real. So we see that reflected in this card. But we also see the humility that I talked about. You see he's dressed simply, sitting on a bench, hard at work. He's wearing this old worker's cloak or vest to cover him. And we also see the passion that he brings to the work. He's wearing red tights. Red is a symbol of passion. The intellectual capacity, commitment to detail in the color blue, his smock, which can have to do with intellect. Yeah, and we just see he looks happy. He's lost in his task. We're going to see that when we look at Kurt Vonnegut, when he talks about or gives tips to writers, one of the things he says to them for a good writer is to write for yourself, for the beauty and the joy of the practice, right? Of course, he also wanted to be able to support his family with his writing, but he was talking about what ultimately led him to success was that commitment to refining his craft. And so we see that refinement of craft here in the card. And then here on the 8, we see a resonance with the description of the faces of the Decan, or excuse me, the faces or the Decan, from the ancient texts where they talked about creativity and sowing and reaping, right? There's a quality of, through this channeling of the creative force, that we produce something beautiful for the world. And we really see that reflected in this Thoth card number 8. So then let's move to the next page, which is, excuse me, the Tree of Life. You know, and I've talked about the Kabbalah in past videos, but I've never really gotten into explaining what Kabbalah is. And it's this mystical system. And this Tree of Life is what I'm always referring to when I've talked about the Kabbalah. And the idea is it represents the descent of divine inspiration from Keter through this lightning bolt strike down into the real world. Malkut is the material world. Keter is the nothingness that inspires, right? And so there's this idea that energy, we get divine inspiration, and it goes through these different archetypal patterns of what it is to be human as well as divine. And it sort of loses its energy. That divine inspiration that we get at the beginning of the project never really manifests fully into what we think it will be by the time it's manifested its energy through the different Sephirot. When you get down to number 10, Malkut, that's the finished product, okay? And so then we can look at, I'm just going to bring up the next page. Forgive me as I refine my presentation. So Mercury and Virgo. So then we can talk about the number 8, right? Remember, this is the 8 of Pentacles. And so we're always looking to the Sephirot associated under the Kabbalah, under the Kabbalistic or the Hermetic Kabbalah Tree of Life, to get a deeper understanding of what the energy of this face or Decan is. And so here we have Had. And Had is the 8th Sephirot, and it symbolizes humility and submission and the intellectual framework that allows for the structuring of ideas and actions. So this is just a replication of what we talked about. It reinforces the idea that something about this Decan is going to have to do with humbly submitting oneself to the process of hard work and refinement to create something in the material world, to take that divine inspiration that we receive and make it into something real. And so there's this dynamic relationship between Netzach, which is the number 7, that comes before the number 8. So we receive this inspiration and this idea for something, but we actually need to put our idea into work. And so we have this dynamic relationship between Netzach and Had. Netzach often represents the spiritual ideals, creativity, and the driving force of inspiration, while Had provides the structure, discipline, and intellectual framework to channel those ideas into practical, tangible actions. Again, this is just a reiteration of what we've already talked about. The vibe of this first decan of Virgo is. So lastly, let's look at an example chart. Kurt Vonnegut, who was an American novelist, satirist, and essayist. He was known for his blend of dark humor. Remember, I said Mercury is kind of this trickster, can have a good sense of humor, right? But also has to do with writing and communication. He was a writer. He wrote science fiction and social commentary. Some of his books were Slaughterhouse-Five, Cat's Cradle, and The Breakfast of Champions. So his experiences as a soldier in World War II, he was captured during the Battle of the Bulge and he survived the bombing at Dresden. He went down into a meat locker three stories below the ground to survive that bombing, and he was in there with corpses, right? And some of the impact of his really difficult experiences in World War II got played out in the novels that he wrote. And just have to say as an aside, his Mercury, right, which rules that Virgo, is in Scorpio, right there with Jupiter, bringing in expansion of his capacity, right, around that Mercury. It strengthens Mercury to have Jupiter with it, and also it's in the sign Scorpio, which is a sign that can have to do with death and sort of the darker side of life. So that really exemplifies who he is. So besides knowing that he was a writer, which is very Virgoan, there's also something to be said for the humble quality, the way in which he wrote. He was a teacher of writing as well. He went to the Iowa Creative, or he taught at the Iowa Teachers Workshop at the University of Iowa, which is really famous. And some of his advice or tips that he gave to writers really exemplifies that humble quality to who he was. So, and the focus on the craft, right? He's articulating the reality that if you want to be a writer, you need to care about the people that you write for. You need to hone your craft, and you need to be doing it out of the center of who you are. That's the solar quality to this Decan, and the humility. So some of the quotes that he has around writing: find a subject that you care about. Find a subject you care about and which you in your heart feel others should care about. The sun can also have to do with that heart energy. It is this genuine caring and not your games with language, which will be most compelling and seductive element in your style. So having that Mercury find its center. Mercury can play games, and he was the trickster after all. But this part of Virgo wants to make sure that there's a dedication in some way to the soul, to that solar quality. He also said, write for your audience. Why should you examine your writing style with the ideal of improving it? Do so as a mark of respect for your readers, whatever you're writing. If you scribble your thoughts any which way, your reader will surely feel that you care nothing about them. And so that also shows sort of the humility and honesty that was part of who he was. And then he also talked about honing your craft, the importance to cut things out that don't fit and to take the time, like the artisan working on his pentacles so diligently. He said, your rule must be this: if a sentence, no matter how excellent, does not illuminate your subject in some new and useful way, scratch it out. So he very much, he very much was committed to his craft. So I'm going to stop the share there. And I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed my little improvement project as a Mercury in Virgo, always trying to make these videos a little bit better and more understandable for you as my listeners. If you did enjoy it, please like and subscribe. It helps people find my content, and come back next week for Virgo 2.